History Center, and we're here with Walter Bishop. Just for the record, could you please state your name?
Walter L. Bishop.
And where and when were you born?
I was born January 30th, 1923.
Do you remember your serial number in the military?
6365821.
Okay. So just to start with, when did you join the service?
June the 30th, 1942.
How old were you when you joined?
Let's see, 23, 42. I was 18 years old.
In the years leading up to the war and before your service, what did you do? Were you in school or?
I worked for a cotton mill when
Where
I
at?
quit. I had done all kind of little jobs. I worked for a plumber helper and the carpenter helper. And just before I joined the service, I went to work in a cotton mill, and I worked there about 2 weeks, and I joined the Navy.
Was that in Columbus?
That was in Columbus. And
when Pearl Harbor was bombed, do you remember when and where you were at and what you were doing?
Let's see. I was probably in bed right at that time. But I was at home. I realized that I was at home. And within the next 3 days, I went down to apply for the Navy. And they turned me down. I had a lazy eye. So I went back continuously, about every week, reapplied. He told me, the recruiting officer told me if I'd keep coming back, if it got short of men, they'd take me even with the lazy eye. So in the meantime, I memorized the eye chart. And I went down and I read the eye chart off to him. He said, well, if you want to get in that bad, I'll take you. So on I was sworn in on June the 30th in Macon, Georgia.
What made you want to join the Navy so badly?
Well, actually, I wanted to join. I wanted to be part of the action. I wanted to see the world, actually, all that go and travel. And that's about the reason, I guess. I know that I had a place in there. I had a place somewhere with the war on, so and I preferred the Navy, and so I kept right after it. I could have got in the Army earlier, but I wanted the Navy. That was what I wanted to be.
What did your family? Did they support you when you wanted to join? How did they feel about that?
They supported me, really and truly. My father was dead, and my mother was off working, and I was living with my grandmother. So my grandmother was my dependent at that time.
After you enlisted, where did they send you for your training, and what kind of training was it?
Well, we went to Macon from Columbus to be sworn in. And from there, they loaded us in a bus and carried us to Norfolk, Virginia. And I went through boot camp in Company 326. It was, they taught us to march a little bit and how to handle guns and things like that. And I believe it was either 8 weeks, I believe, of basic training. And then I came back to Norfolk, Virginia, in an outgoing unit. And they tested me and sent me to diesel school. I went to Richmond, Virginia, and went through basic diesel. And then when I came out, they assigned me to Boston, Massachusetts, and I went aboard the 309.
LST 309.
LST 309, yes. And then what happened then, on January 11th, 1943, we started down the coast down to Bermuda. We went to Bermuda and spent 2 days, and went from there to Gibraltar and anchored out at Gibraltar for overnight, and then we headed down the Mediterranean to North Africa. We went to, when we got outside of Gibraltar, we was attacked by torpedo planes. But LST don't draw but very little draft. So torpedoes didn't seem to bother us too much. They left us alone. We went on down to Oran. We stopped at Oran, North Africa. And then, when we went over on the LST, we had a LCT, which is a smaller landing craft, on the top deck. We went into a little place in Africa, Tunis, I believe the name was, T-E-N-I-S, I believe was the name of the town, and dumped that LCT. And then we continued down the coast of Africa, and we stopped in small ports along North Africa coast there. And I remember well because I got a toothache real bad. And they sent me to a field hospital. And when we got to the field hospital, they had one dentist and one man to pump the machine. They had one of the pump machines, and he drilled my teeth. And while he was drilling, we could hear the gunfire. We was not too far behind the line. And they called this technician, whoever I guess is helper, the dentist helper, out, and then the dentist had to pump the machine and drill my teeth at the same time. That was a horrible experience. And then we continued on down to Lake Bizerte, North Africa. That's one of the largest man-made lakes, I think, at that time in the world. And we continued, we loaded with different troops and things, and some supplies, and we moved around up and down the coast of Africa for a while. And then we started training for the invasion of Sicily. And we stayed in Bizerte Harbor most of the time, and pretty soon the Germans found out we was there building up for an invasion, so every night they came over and bombed us, and high altitude bombers, and then dive bombers came under the high altitude bombers. So I believe it was, best I remember, I can't remember the date, but we left there going from there to Sicily, and we carried the 3rd Division Rangers sitting on top of 1,640 tons of ammunition and high-test gasoline. And our destination was Gila in Sicily. When we got to Gila, we couldn't get the ship with all that ammunition up close enough to unload it. So we had to come back to Licata, Sicily. And we pulled into a little loading ramp there and unloaded that 1,640 tons of ammunition and high-test gasoline with all hands. Everybody responded, officers and all of them, wanted to get out of there and get that ammunition and gasoline off of there. Well, as we pulled out of Gila, and because we couldn't get to the beach, we had to pull our anchor back in and come back up to Licata. Well, just as we come out, another LST, and I believe the number was 158, the best I remember, pulled in our slot. And we hadn't gone out of sight, and a German bomber come over and dropped a bomb right in the middle of 158. So I know that somebody in Africa had told them which ship was carrying ammunition and gasoline and where its berth was at Gila, because that blew it up pretty well. And then we went back to, after we unloaded all that ammunition, we stayed under just about constant attack there at Licata till we got all that stuff unloaded. And let's see, well, before we got into the beach there, they had some guns, big guns on railroad cars, and they was running up and down the beach, firing at, to keep us off the beach. Well, a cruiser. We had one cruiser in the convoy, and I believe it was a Philadelphia, I'm not sure. And it knocked that gun off of that railroad car after about 3 shots. And so we eased on into Licata and unloaded. And then after that we came back and we made trips just backward and forward until we got those soldiers supplied there. And we went up and down the coast of Sicily and different ports and followed the soldiers in. And then we went back to Bizerti again and started reforming. And then, I don't know if it was September, I believe it was September, we went to Salerno, Italy, and landed there, and put the troops ashore, and then carried supplies, kept supplying them until they moved up. And then they made the ship behind the lines jump to Anzio, and we left there. We excuse me. We came back to Bizerti, and we just kept carrying supplies to those ships that had already landed. I mean, the soldiers that had already landed. And then we, after we left there, we came back. And they sent us to Falmouth, England. We got to Falmouth, England on Thanksgiving Day. I remember that. In the meantime, we got rammed in the night by a freighter. And so when we got to Falmouth, we had to go to, let's see, we went to Londonderry, Northern Ireland, to be repaired. And then we went to Roseneath, Scotland. I don't know why we went there, but while we was up there, we went to Roseneath. And then we came around by Penard, Wales, and came back to Falmouth. And then we started training for Normandy. And we made the trips up and down the English Channel to different places to carry supplies and get soldiers set up for the invasion. We went to London and to Pillsbury Docks in the Thames River there. And we came back, and that training for, well, from, when I say training, I mean we carried troops to the beach and let them practice, you know, getting on and off the LSTs. And then we loaded up to go to Normandy. And first day was canceled. I think you know that the weather canceled it there. And we next day we taken out. We went to Normandy. We landed on Omaha Beach. We were the second LST in to unload on Normandy Beach. And then
What time of day was that?
Well, it was just at daybreak we was getting there with our load. And I looked up and you couldn't hardly see the sky. There were so many planes up there. I felt pretty safe with all them planes up there. And then we started moving down around the coast after we got those supplied at Normandy. We started moving down to where we went to Le Havre and Cherbourg on that part of France, and we went backward and forward there. We had a lot of pictures, but that ship was so small we didn't have nothing on that ship but just us and a few guns that we had. But we had a boy there that had a camera, and he was a photographer in civilian life, but our ship didn't carry a slot for a photographer, so the only time he could take pictures was you know, when it wasn't general quarters, because he had a general quarters station just like the rest of us. But otherwise, when things were slack, he'd taken pictures of movements and things like that. I think some of them that. And after, let's see, we had loaded up to come back to the States. And they had to break through. They had the Black Forest. We had to unload what we had loaded and reload and start supplying the soldiers again. So that kept us there about another month. And then we came back to the States. It taken us 30 days to come across the North Atlantic in that LST. And some days we lost mileage. We posted each day. They posted the mileage to how far it was to New York. Some mornings you'd get up, you'd be 10, 12 miles further than you was when you went to bed. And so it taken us full 30 days to get back to New York.
Is that because of the tides and the wind?
Yeah, it was rough weather. The North Atlantic in that part of the year was rough. And LST just sits on top of the water like a cup or something you throw in there, you know, it just bounces that way. And top speed, I think, was, best I remember, was 10 knots. And we didn't never go top speed. We done about 8 knots a day, and that ain't too much. And we came back, we went around to Houston, Texas, to Brown Shipyard. And then they started working on the ship, getting it back in shape. We had some shrapnel holes and some places where we'd been near misses and things like that, but we never did have a direct hit on the ship. Shrapnel killed, well, it knocked the back of the boy's head off, and that was at Salerno. And but as far as injuries, we didn't have a whole lot of injuries on there. One of the boys they had to take him off after that boy got his head blowed off. They had to take him off, and that's about the only two that we lost in the whole shebang.
Let me go back, if it's all right, I'll ask you a couple of questions about what you've talked about so far. What did you think of your shipmates and commanding officers on your ship?
I was well pleased with the companionship. We was real close knit. Being that few people on the ship, we was real close knit. They and had one of the best skippers in the world.
What was his name?
Lambert, Charles Lambert. He's dead now, but he was some kind of fella. And let's see, we didn't have a whole lot of people. We had a gunnery officer, engineering officer, and I think a personnel officer. Oh, we had a pharmacist mate. We didn't have a doctor, nothing. On the trip to Sicily, we had a boy get appendicitis. And when we landed at Sicily, that ship was just rolling, just continuously. The water was so rough, we couldn't hardly get into the beach. And we didn't have a doctor and a surgeon and nothing, but one of the Army doctors put that boy on the chow table just like this. Had never operated on nobody and taken out his appendix. And he was at the last convention we went to, so he done him real good. I didn't know that doctor's name. I don't know his name, but he must have been some kind of doctor. But they'd had to hold the table, chow table, to keep it from rolling out from under him. We had men in there trying to hold him down and didn't have the proper equipment, but the boy came out mighty well, I guess.
Speaking of chow, how was the food and rations y'all got?
We never did do without nothing to eat. We was we had, if our skipper wouldn't let us eat when we had soldiers, you know, we carried solid mass of soldiers when we moved, and skipper wouldn't. What we eat, the soldiers eat. They'd take their rations and mix it in with our chow, or hash, or whatever we had, and feed everybody. You know, they didn't have to eat the regular seafood. I mean, their food, their rations. They didn't have to eat just their rations. A cold ration, we had a hot meal while they was on the ship with us. He seen to that.
Of all these landings that you made, all these different, the big invasions like Salerno and Anzio and Normandy and all those, does one stick out in your mind more than any of the others?
Well, really let's see. Well, naturally the Normandy one was because we was the second ship in there, and the battle was going full blast when we got there. So that was, and planes, like I said, when we got on that beach, you was there to the next tide. So sometime we was sitting there, when we used our recirculating water to run the engines and the generator, that's what we had. We had to wait till the water come back in to be able to maneuver at all. And it was an exciting time. You sat there and watched what was going on around you, and dive bombers was running up and down that beach, and every once in a while I was hitting one. So you didn't know when the time was going to come, but it was that was most interesting, I'm sure. The others were small hasts to that.
What when your enlist was approaching the shore at Omaha, what was going through your mind?
Well, I tell you, we were so busy at that time. We was getting the small boats with the soldiers in them. We had to load the soldiers in the boats, and getting the boats on the beach. We didn't have time to do much thinking. We was kept busy up to that last boatload of soldiers left, and then we thought all hell broke loose. Is what we thought, and. But the one at Normandy, now others was done under all of it was darkness. We done off of the beach at Sicily and Salerno. But just before we got into Sicily, somewhere or another there was a mix-up between the soldiers and the pilots and the paratroopers, and they dumped a bunch of paratroopers before they got to the beach, and that kept us busy fishing them out of the water, and the ones that wasn't actually on the gun was out getting those boys out of the water, and so that was an exciting time because you'd pull one of them out of the water, and first thing he was done was cussing.
We've got the ensign here that flew over the ship during the Salerno operation. How did you come to have this ensign?
Well, they're supposed to be destroyed, I guess you know that. And the quartermaster, me and the boy that was quartermaster on duty at the time was good buddies. And we run around a little bit together and all. And he was going to burn it. That's a proper procedure for him. And some way or another, I tricked him out of it. He never did get over it. He told me, he said, you could have got me kicked out of the Navy. I said, oh, no. But that's how I come about it. It was trickery. It wasn't a presentation.
Did you keep it with your stuff or send it on home then?
I kept it with my stuff until we got back, and then I taken it out, and since 50 years it's been in a cedar chest at home. It hadn't taken it out of that cedar chest for that long. And when he mentioned any mementos, about the only one I had.
The the Normandy landings, and while you were training for that, and while you were carrying them out, did you know then that you were part of something very historic?
Oh yeah, we knew that what was coming on. See, we brought, well, we was in the Tiger operation, and that's where we was carrying LSTs. There was, I guess, 12, 15. Now, I might be wrong in these figures. That's been 50 years, but I think it's about 12 or 15 LSTs in the convoy. And we had English stroller, I think, as a convoy, as an escort. And 2 German E-boats broke into the convoy and sunk several ships, with 2 or 3 ships. And we was the second ship in the convoy, so they come in behind us. They got towards the end of the convoy to sink the ships. And we knew right then we was in for something big. But we didn't, we trained with they didn't know whether they was going to be able to get pontoons into the beach or not. And they built a contraption that that we trained with for a while, so that if the weather was too bad and couldn't get to the beach, we could use to, I forget the name of it.
Is that the mulberries? Or am I thinking of the wrong thing?
That's possible. I know that General Montgomery came and watched the training. I remember that. And that's about all that the special training that we had, other than just going into the beach and dropping the soldiers and then getting back off. And
when they canceled the invasion that first day, how did you feel about that, and what sense did you get from the soldiers you were carrying? How did they feel about it?
Well, they was ready to go. They was horned to a fine point, and they was ready to go ahead and get it over with. Most of them was discontented because they had to spend the extra days on them ships. It's like that soldier asked me, he came up and he said, I said, "Sailor," he said, "tell me something." I said, "What is that?" He said, "How do you dig a foxhole in these things?" I said, "Well, it'd be rather hard."
VE Day, when y'all got the word that the Germans had surrendered, what was it like on the ship?
Well, I was back and done trained ships when VE Day came. After the invasion, and after the time that they made us unload there, we had about 4 more trips across the English Channel, and then we started back to the States. Well, when we got back to the States and all, when the Germans surrendered, I was in Norfolk, Virginia, in a little town right there on the LCT. They were waiting to load it on a cargo ship to go to Japan. So I was well pleased because they canceled the trip to Japan for me right then. And the LST that I was on went on to the Pacific. I got off of it in New Orleans, Louisiana, and I came back home for a leave, and then I was reassigned.
When you came home after World War II was over, and you came home, was life more difficult? Did you have trouble adjusting, getting back into civilian life?
No, I worked all the time. As soon as I got back, I got me a job and went to work, and I was involved with my job. But I worked there for 2 years.
Which job was this?
I worked for a battery plant at that time. I was foreman of a line in the battery plant, and I was still single, and I got kind of itchy, and me and one of my friends decided we'd join the Navy again, re-enlist in the Navy, and we enlisted and thought our name both started with a B, so we thought, well, when they start drafting that, we'll have a chance of being on the same ship. So when they called his name, they sent him to San Diego, and they called my name and sent me on shore duty in Charleston, South Carolina. So I was on a yard tug and a yard oiler in Charleston for 2 years, and then they sent me to, well, I got married while I was home on a weekend leave, and I was married 3 days, and I got a telephone call to come back and don't bring nothing I couldn't take to the Far East. So they sent me, when I got back they had a plane there, and he flew me to San Francisco. When I got to San Francisco, they put me on a aircraft carrier, and I believe Boxer aircraft carrier, and carried me to Yokosuka, Japan. And I stayed in Yokosuka for about a year. And then I got on that icebreaker I was telling you about, and we came back to Boston to re-equip that. And I got off of it in Boston, got on a repair ship, Vulcan. And that's where I got discharged from there the second time. So I spent 2 years and 5 months in Charleston on shore duty on that second one. And I was on a yard tug and a yard oiler. We kept the ships in mothballs. We kept them, the fuel level up to 95%. And that was pretty good duty. I was well pleased with that.
And after you were discharged the second time, that's when you went back and joined the fire department?
When I came out, yeah, I went to work for the railroad, and I worked for the railroad about, I guess about 2 months. And I already had my application in for the fire department. I had taken fire training in the Navy, so I got back on the fire department. And let's see, now when I left, I was working for the railroad, and they told me that I had been selected to go before the Personnel Review Board for a job in the fire department. And working with the railroad, I worked 5 days out of town, and then come home on the weekend, and that's all the time. And so I decided I wanted to be home. And when the job came for the fire department, I was gladly accepted it, and I worked 33 years.
How often between that second discharge and now did you think about the time in service that you had?
Constantly, just about it. I get thinking about it. Had a bunch of pictures of the fellas and the places we'd been and all, and I thought about it a lot. I think if I hadn't been married, I'd have went back in, but I didn't. She made that as one of the figures. I couldn't go back in the Navy.
Did you ever talk about it very much during those 30 years?
I didn't talk about it only when I started talking to my son-in-law about the service. That's the only time. In fact, all that stuff was pictures and all. I didn't bother with them too much. I had a family then. I'd started a family, and I had to make a living for them. I worked while I was on the fire department. I worked I worked 1 day on and 1 day off, and that day off I worked. I had another job, and then they switched us to 24 on and 48 off. So I had a job 2 of them days for a while. And then I finally broke down to one job in the fire department. But most of the time I was in there, I worked an extra job too. So I had my time pretty well taken up, but I didn't have time to get lonesome in it.
What made you willing to talk to us today?
My son-in-law.
Did you make any really good friends in the service that you kept in touch with?
Yes, I had quite a few friends, but most of them are dead now. I'm one of the very few that's still, out of the bunch I run around with, during the war, I'm one of the very few that's still living. There's one other that lives out in Oregon, so we don't ever see each other. One time at one of the conventions we saw each other. That's the only time. But it was for years that we didn't have no contact at all. And then one day I was reading American Legion magazine, and I seen what excuse me, where they was having a convention. So right away I called and made connection with them, and we started. Just about every year we had a convention after that. Well, I've been to about 5 or 6, I guess. Had two in North Carolina, Asheville, North Carolina. One in Las Vegas. One in New Orleans. And one in Nashville, Tennessee. So we for a while there we got together about every year, and we got one scheduled this October, I believe it is, for New Orleans.
Going to that one?
Yeah, I think so.
There was, the United States involvement in the war was very costly. Was it worth it?
Well, undoubtedly it was, because we'd probably be doing a goose step now if we hadn't, because the Germans was seeking power, and they was moving as fast as they could, in my opinion, to conquer the world. And if somebody hadn't have stopped them, they would have, because they had the, I guess, the best fighting force. I'd say the next to the best fighting force in the world. And they had been building for years and years. And just like at Normandy, they was dug in to fight off just about any kind of attack they thought. And it would have seemed as if there was. I don't know if we hit the time just right or what, but to overcome him. But they was well fortified.
With that in mind, and and also the sacrifices and everything that your generation went through, in your opinion, why do you think it's important that we remember the sacrifices that were made during that time?
Well, strictly one of them for the reason that we're still a free country, and another one is that we looked up to with most of the nations in the world because of our power that we built up. And I was just proud to be a part of it. I wouldn't miss it for nothing.
Do you feel like it made you a better person?
I'm sure it did. I'd never been out of Columbus, Georgia, but short trips. I didn't know nothing about the world or what was going on, and naturally I got out and had to fend for myself, and I learned to take care of myself and to see the country, know how the other half lived.
Is there one memory more than any others that stick out in your mind?
In the battles,
Any during the whole time in service, is there just one memory that sort of comes to mind first?
well, at Salerno, we was in a convoy laying off, and we tried to get in, and they had 88s lined up, fortified, to keep us off the beach. So we had to lay out for a while. They said they didn't want to lose none of the equipment that we had, so they didn't want us to push on in there, force our way in and land. They wanted to wait till the opportune time. So we was laying off the beach, and it was a moonlight night, big bright moon up there, and we was on the outskirts of the convoy, waiting to get in, and undoubtedly a German plane had made the bombing raid and had one bomb left, because it come around and got us lined up with the moon. And it sounded like it was fixing to land on the ship. It'd come right down, that motor grinding, coming diving down. And that was burnt in my memory. He dropped that one bomb, and it hit just off the bow. And I was on the bow. So that's the first thing flashed in my mind usually when I think about the war. There wasn't, if he'd have had two bombs, he wouldn't have missed that second one, I know. And he'd have probably hit us with that, and if it hadn't have been for the quick thinking of the skipper of the ship. He had all engines reversed just about the time he felt like that plane was going to drop that bomb. And undoubtedly the pilot had us figured just right, because it would have landed about the middle if all of a sudden the ship hadn't stopped and started backing up out there. But he was a smart skipper. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he was a gunnery officer on the California at Pearl Harbor. And I believe he was a gunner chief, and they promoted him to an officer, and he taken over at LST. They used officers, that had come up through the ranks, some of them, most of them, and he was a lieutenant commander, and he had come up through the ranks, and he was sharp. I don't know where he ever went to school, in military schools or what, but he knew navigation and all. And had a feeling for his men.
All right, is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to talk about? Anything you'd like to say?
Well, let's see. One of the big moments is we carried Patton's troops into France. I remember that. We carried them into Shipboard, France, just before he made the run to cut off the Germans before they got the best, the submarine pins. And this 3rd Division Rangers, they stationed at Fort Benning now. And I didn't realize that until just lately. I think I'm going to go out there and see what they got written up about that. We carried them into Sicily. They were a fine bunch of men.
I have just one further question, and if you don't want to answer that, that's perfectly fine. The time you were under fire and being in combat, in your own words, tell me and future generations what that's like. I mean, what's going through your mind?
Well, I think anybody with any feeling at all would be scared, afraid. And naturally I was. But it's just tense, and it's just like you got confidence in your buddies. just like I was on the aircraft gun. And them planes didn't bother me near as much as it would been if it had been, I'd have been a bunch of fellas gathered up there and started shooting that gun. I had confidence in them and all the men that was in my gun crew. And see, being in the engine room, I was in the engine room during travel time, and at combat I had a gun station. So I was busy between the two. I'd be in the engine room, we have attacked, I'd had to come up and get on the gun. It done a lot of damage to my ears. I still can't hear. But other than that, I was mighty lucky. I never received any injuries other than like the toothache.
Well, all right. I think that's about it. If you feel comfortable with that.
Well, naturally, we had a photographer, and he didn't take any action pictures because he was always at his general quarters station. So with my pictures and all, I didn't we didn't have a whole lot of action pictures. You know, we had a few, but if he'd have been assigned a Navy photographer so that we could have, you know, he didn't have to go to general quarters. He was a quartermaster, and he had to leave whatever he was doing naturally at general quarters. But other times he was taking pictures, but most of them was leaves of pictures. And that, during the Korean part of it, I mean, when bringing the icebreaker back, you know, icebreaker rolls more than LST, and I didn't think that was possible, but it does. We run into a typhoon in the Japanese Sea. I eat split pea soup for 3 days. That's all they could fix was split pea soup. So I can't stand the sight of that stuff. But most of it was just general. Naturally, I wasn't on a warship. I was on a landing ship. Our job was landing troops and supplies. The fact of carrying that we didn't really realize, you know, the importance of carrying the 16 tons of ammunition and high-test gasoline to Sicily till we seen that ship get hit. And then everybody turned out to unload that stuff. we didn't have no trouble getting that unloaded. That's naturally we had the regular run of submarines and things like that, but submarines that I guess had already found out they couldn't do much with a LST because it had such a shallow draft. We run into a lot of Frenchmen, and now when we went to Normandy, each time we go to Normandy, we bring back either right after the landing, we brought back paratroopers, you know, that a lot of them had missed their mark and all, and then other times we brought back German prisoners and things that they carried that we had captured from them. We brought them back to England. We went up one side of England, down the other. We just, in that time.
Well, actually, let me ask you, talk about having Germans. And I'd like to ask this question for the English, the French, and the Germans. What was your impression of each?
Well, I didn't have any close contact with the Germans other than when they were prisoners of war. But I know one thing, the Englishmen they were good sailors, good fighters, and we never had much personal contact, but you know, working and the things that they accomplished during the landing at Normandy and clearing out the coast of France over there and all. I respect them for that. They was good fighters. Naturally, we worked with some British troops. You know, we carried British troops sometimes like we carried American. Now we went to, they sent us to Gold Beach on a trip, and we had to take the British. There was either the British and the Canadians, or one of them. We had to take him off of Lahore Beach because the Germans had off of Gold Beach because the Germans had them zeroed in with those 88 guns. And we went in there and evacuated them off of that beach. And there was a lot of exciting times along. It wasn't just constantly going and coming, but I realized one time we was going down the coast to Shipboard, and there had a destroyer as an escort, and most of it was quiet down that far down, and we passed a little peninsula stuck out in the water, and the Germans had a gun emplacement there, and they started firing, and had the destroyer escort fired back. Well, finally, the Germans hit the back of that destroyer. Just hit the water level, didn't do a whole lot of damage. But that skipper of that thing turned that thing and nosed it in at that peninsula and fired everything he had at it and blew that peninsula out of the water. And that was real amusing. Naturally, we was on the ship. We was watching it all. We carried 20 millimeters and 40 millimeters, and for the Mediterranean operation there, we had one 3-inch gun, but I don't think we ever really learned how to shoot that 3-inch. we couldn't depend on it anyway.
I know LST is a landing ship tank.
Yeah.
Did you ever carry any tanks?
Carried tanks constantly. One time we carried, they said it was a secret weapon, and they had them covered up. Didn't nobody get to see them. But I think it was a tank that floated. And we went up the Thames River. Let's see, is it the Thames in France? Thames River, yeah. We went up the Thames River to some Rouen, France, way up inland, and carried those tanks. And when we started to come back, the tide was going out. And the tide in that river was so strong, and it was so narrow that we couldn't make all the turns in that thing. We had to reverse the engines all the way down that river. That was when that tide went out over there, but it went out. We had a lot of submarines try to break into the convoy, but usually the depth charges and all from the escorts taking care of them, so undoubtedly with just one submarine in there. They wasn't too active in the English Channel at that time. Now when the buzz bombs started coming over from Germany, the first one we seen, we was going up the English Channel, and we could see it, didn't know what it was. It looked like a little small airplane or something, making a heck of a noise. And so we asked the captain, could we fire on it? We went to general quarters, and I asked him if we could fire on it. No, sir, we wouldn't let us fire on it. But we didn't know what it was, we thought it was a plane. And then we made all them runs with them coming up and down there. One time we was going across a yard in Pillsbury Dock in the Thames there, and we were just out messing around more or less, looking around. We was in the dock there at Pillsbury. And there was a bunch of English fellas sitting over there eating their lunch. And one of the buzz mums come over, and me and the boy that was with me, we run and jumped up under a boxcar. You know, and it didn't even faze them. They didn't look like they thought nothing about it. And we jumped up under that boxcar. And when we come out, they were just laughing. And we, no, wise-o, what they were laughing at. Come to find out that boxcar was loaded with ammunition.
Sounds like you had a whole lot of close calls.
We had a lot of time. It's look back on it, it's funny, you know, in memories. But
would you use the word fun to describe some of your experiences? Anyway?
Oh, sure. Some of it was. Some of it was fun. And you know, we was over there 2.5 years, and on that tour of duty. The LST, the word was that the LST was made for 90 days. That's all they cared about, you know, for 90 days. And that was to make the landing at Sicily. And when they made the landing at Sicily, it worked so good, they decided to keep it. And then they made the landing at Salerno. And the behind the lines hit at Anzio. And then they carried it to Normandy. It worked so good, they carried it to Normandy. And altogether, that 90 days wound up being 2.5 years. That's how long we was over there on that tour of duty.
It's a good while.
It sure is. But half of that time, you didn't have no liberty, and what you did have was in those African towns down there, you know. We had, finally we got over to Italy, we had some pretty fine thing there. Now they had a big, in Palermo, Sicily, it was just a little round harbor like that. And they got a bunch of ships in there one time, and we was on our way to there. And the Germans sent dive bombers in there, and they come over the mountain. In that little harbor, there's so many ships there, they couldn't maneuver. They come around, they was cutting their bow lines and stern lines, trying to get out of there. And it was a big mess. I don't know if people in America read much about it or not, but they lost two or three ships in that thing were hit. And we was, I guess maybe we was half a day from there.
Talk about people in America hearing things. When you were on board the ship, or actually any time during the war, how much information did you have as to what was going on and what your ship was doing?
Well, really, most information we got was from the ship itself. We didn't, you know, everything was quiet then, hush, and we didn't get a whole lot of news on there. And I know in Palermo, Sicily, in Licata, Sicily, when that landed, the soldiers went in there and pushed the Italians and what Germans was there on out. So we went over and looked over the town and all. And there was one fellow there found a tape, not a tape player, a record player and a radio console set. And somewhere or another he bargained for it, brought it back aboard the ship, and it had a bunch of Italian records and one American record. It was Going Home on that record. We wore that thing down into the pad there.
Did you get on your leave? Did you get ashore as often as you would have liked?
Well, our skipper was real lenient. Anytime he thought it was safe, and he'd let us ashore. Now, I think actually we got more than most ships, because, like I say, usually you get a man that came up through the ranks. He's been through it all. He knows. And every chance he got, if he figured it safe, he would let us go ashore. And of course, he put limits on it. We could you know, around the docks and all. We had to be close to the ship in case we had to leave in a hurry. Usually LSTs didn't have to leave in too big a hurry. But I really and truly, looking back on it, I wouldn't have missed it for nothing.
So you'd do it again?
Yeah, but I don't know. After I got married, all that was gone. I forgot all that then. But I would have actually, I intended to make a career out of the Navy when I went in. But while I was stationed in Charleston, I met my wife and we got married, and then that put a halt to that.
Well, let's see. We've got about an hour on tape. If you're comfortable with that, I know I don't want to keep you too long or wear you out. So
Well,
personally, I could keep you here all day.
well, anything that you want to know that I know, I'll tell you.
Right.
Of course, it's been 50 years. I forget a lot of dates, and probably.
Well, one thing that's good too is we've got your information here. You know, as other things come up, you know, might get you in here again too, just to do a follow-up interview. We do that sometimes. But the questions I had, you've answered pretty much all of them and then some. So that's it. Like I said, if you've got anything else.
Well, let's see. As far as I know that Japanese, on the Korean part of it, that Japanese icebreaker that we got there, all the writing was in not Russian. All the writing was in Russian. No, you didn't have the pipelines for, you know, to hang tags, usually what the lines are. Me being an engineer, I was down in that engine room trying to figure out which was oil lines and which was the water lines. That kept me busy for quite a while. But when they rushed me off to Japan, when I got over there, they didn't know what I was over there for. And they had flew me across the country and put me on the Boxer. And that's when that Boxer made that speed run. You know, it broke a record, a title record, a trip between San Francisco and Yokosuka, Japan. I thought, man, they really want me in a hurry. And I got over there and I went to the report in. I asked the fellow what my duty was going to be. He said, well, said, I tell you, said, according to this record, you were sent here to help establish a emergency diesel station. And said, according to this thing, it ain't due to start in 2 years. I said, man, I ain't got but 7 months in the Navy. He said, well, said, I don't guess you can help there then. No, so that what they done, they extended me a year. I was on a 3-year tour of duty, so Mr. President Truman signed the order that would extend me for a year, and I had another year to put in.
That was good of the president, wasn't it?
Yeah, I couldn't wait. I hadn't been married but 3 days, by the way. 3 days when they called me and sent me over there. And then him hanging. Well, I had 7 months to do when I left, when they called me. I was stationed in Charleston, and I talked it over with the commanding officer. I said, I think I'm gonna get married when I get home. And I said, if there's any plans to send me anywhere, I'd like to know if you have any information on it. He said, let's see. He said, you got 7 months to do? So, oh no. I said, don't worry. He said, they ain't gonna send you overseas for 7 months. I said, okay. I come back, I went in his office, and me and him went round and round for a while. He said, look at him. Don't you say another word to me. He said, look at this paper. He had been sent to Guam.
Now, how did you break the news to your wife, and how did she take it?
Well, we was together when the telephone call came, and I said, "What?" They said, "You report back immediately." I said, "Well, it'll take me another day to get there." I said, "I'll leave in the morning." And they said, "Well, we want you within 2 days." So they drove me to Savannah, and I called a bus in Savannah up to Charleston. And 6 o'clock the next morning, I was on that airplane on the way to San Francisco. And I stayed out there about 2 weeks, I guess, something before they put me on that aircraft carrier. So I thought when they put me on that airplane, man, I was gone. I thought, they gonna send me straight to Japan. But they didn't. The LST I was on, it went on to the Pacific, and it participated in another 2 landings. I don't know. They was over there for quite a while before they decommissioned it. And
under the same skipper in Japan, or in the Pacific?
No, we changed skippers in, I believe, in New Orleans. The skipper went ashore in New Orleans, and we got a new skipper. And we wasn't near as pleased with him. You don't get to choose. That's one thing. But they said at the convention that they had a letter that the skipper had passed away, and he wasn't an old fella. He was fairly young, but he'd been in the Navy a while at Pearl Harbor, so he might have been a little older than I thought. He was real active. I guess that's about all, unless it's something you know that you'd like to ask me about. I'll tell you anything I know.
No, that's perfect. Like I said, I've got your information here. If something comes up, I'll just give you a call or something, and to get in touch with you that way.
When I got to Japan, they put me on another LSU that they'd taken over from the Army, and we scuttled around in that around the harbor there, and we run up and down the coast of Japan, taking supplies and all. It was LCT in the Navy, and the Army just taking them over when, I guess, after the conflict in Germany, and started using them as supply ships. So they moved the Navy crew in there on them, and we started making them ships around to Okinawa. So we went to Tokyo, and I can't think, about 3 of the biggest cities anyway. And that's what we did the time we were there until they brought this icebreaker in. And me being just married 3 days when they said that thing was going to Boston to be refinished to put back in service, I started working right then to get on it. And I did manage to get on it, and we brought it back through. Engine broke down Pearl Harbor, and we went in there and stayed 2 weeks in Pearl Harbor while the Hawaiians redid the engine, and then we came on in to Boston.
Did you have any leave while you were in Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, we didn't do nothing. The Hawaiians was doing the work, and we had free time there. One of the boys that I run around with had been stationed there, and he was in the motor pool, and he had friends there. And one of his friends had a Model T Ford with a rumble seat in it. And since we didn't have nothing, he told him any time he wanted to use it during the day, he was welcome to use it. So he got it, and we would ride all over the islands and all in that T-model Ford, just so we was there time he got off from work. And it was really nice. I got a bug in my ear over there, and they plundered around in there. Wasn't nothing open but a sick bay when it happened, and they wallowed around in my ear trying to get it out, and I never could get the bug out of my ear. So I had a lot of trouble with my ears since I've been out. You tell these hearing aids, I can't hear a thing without them.
Well, all right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Well,